Bob Costas, the Hall of Fame broadcaster, joining us on the program. Good morning, Bob. How are you?
I'm okay, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing okay, trying to figure out how we get baseball back. Like, now I'm hearing maybe there's a World Cup type scenario if we get something up later in the summer. What are you hearing as what would actually be a distinct possibility?
Well, they have to get in some regular season games to make it representative, even if they go to a tournament type thing for the postseason. And I think that baseball fans would accept anything, I've said this before, anything short of running the bases clockwise, they'd accept because of the unique circumstances. They'd accept a World Series in a dome or a warm weather neutral site. They'd accept all the experimentation. Now's the time. Electronic plate umpire, pitch clock with nobody on base, everything. Fiddle with different postseason concepts. But you got to play at least a representative number of regular season games before you concede even an expanded playoff field. The latest thing, which you were just detailing, is not something that they would go to on a permanent basis, but it might be, underline might, there's lots of proposals out there, but it might be the best solution because players do not want to be quarantined for several months. These are young people with young families in many cases. That's not going to work. Even if the stands are empty, which is certainly going to be the case at the outset, if not throughout in 2020, if they're able to play at all, even with no fans in the stands, playing in your home ballpark is going to be so much easier. You've got all the facilities and everything else in place, and then players would be able to go home. And on the road, you quarantine them in a single hotel. That seems doable. But as you look at it from a medical standpoint, we're not experts, but we can see that there are a lot of hurdles to clear before they can say with some sort of assurance, they can responsibly say, yes, this is safe to do, not just practical to do, but safe to do.
Do you work backwards if you're baseball? I know that Scott Boras said, hey, we could have baseball right after Christmas, and you could have a World Series then. I don't know if you say this is the last date that we would have baseball. Now we work back and say, can we get in 100 games or whatever is going to be constitutes a fair and representative of a season?
I think 80 is okay. Remember 1981, they played a split season because of a strike. So you had separate division champions from the first half and the second half. The Dodgers wound up winning the World Series, and nobody considers that illegitimate. But your point is well taken. You got to work backwards because assuming if you're able to play in some way at all in 2020, you're then assuming there's going to be a full season in 2021. Fingers crossed. If that's the case, you can't play into January and then turn around and have spring training.
Yeah, it's just you hear all these scenarios, and I applaud these leagues for thinking out of the box. I just get nervous when I hear these arbitrary dates where, we're going to start now. We plan on playing this many games. We don't know. This changes every day. It changes, it feels like,
Sure,
a couple of times a day. I just don't know. And Dave Roberts, the Dodgers manager, said, hey, whoever wins this year, there's no asterisk attached to this. I don't even want to worry about an asterisk. I want to worry about can we actually play? Then we can worry about the damn asterisk after this. When do you think there's a start date that you would say that to me sounds plausible?
I wouldn't even venture a guess.
Okay.
Everything keeps changing, even with the experts from a medical standpoint. It's just an educated guess. So the leagues, all of them, not just baseball, they're all right to have various contingency plans, best case scenarios, worst case scenarios, everything in between. And I think this is a good opportunity for baseball to send up all the trial balloons. I heard one that's floating around. I wish I had thought of it myself. And this would be for when they're able to play a full season and things have returned to normal. We talked about this before, Dan. Baseball has an interest in creating more postseason revenue and more inventory and therefore revenue. And one suggestion we talked about a couple of months ago was only the one division winner, the number one, gets a bye, and the other two division winners have to be thrown in with the wild cards. And I didn't like that because it minimizes the importance of the regular season and puts those division winners in a crapshoot. Here's a new idea. I wish I could claim it, but I've heard it. 3 division winners, as ever. 4 wild cards. So you've expanded the postseason by 4 teams, 2 additional teams in each league. But here's the way it goes. All three division winners get a bye, which they've earned. Now you've got a knockout series where the one wild card that will emerge into the division series has to win 2 games. One plays 1 game on the home field of the number 1 wild card. 2 plays 3 on the home field of the number 2. The 2 survivors meet on the home field of the highest remaining seed, and the winner moves into the division series. Now you've expanded the playoffs, yes. You've provided television with additional single elimination games, which they love, but you've actually put more emphasis on the long regular season because the division winners stand completely apart from the wild card round, and now the wild card survivor has to win 2 games instead of 1, use pitchers. They're at a disadvantage going into the postseason. You've accomplished 2 things. You've modernized by expanding the playoffs, but you've also put additional emphasis, old school style, on the regular season. I wish I'd thought of it myself.
Is this a one-off, or would you like this proposed as baseball moves forward when we actually have a regular, 162 game schedule?
No, I think this makes sense going forward with a full season under normal circumstances. What they do this year, I'd be open to anything this year because the circumstances are so different this time around. I think baseball fans would accept anything.
Have you called a game with no fans?
Nah. Oh, no, with no fans. Well, I was the voice of the Spirits of St. Louis in the mid-'70s, and there were some games there were some games then, and you're a basketball guy, I swear. The Spirits against the San Antonio Spurs, and here's Marvin Barnes right in front of me as I'm sitting courtside, about to inbound, guarded by George Gervin, and there's a crowd of 812 in a 19,000-seat arena. You got time for a story?
Yes.
Okay. Rudy Martzke, who we all know as the first and long-running sports TV critic for the USA Today, now happily retired in Florida. Rudy was the director of operations for the Spirits of St. Louis. And now there's a timeout, and they've announced the crowd as something like 3,000 or something. And I look around, and there's clusters of fans, and it doesn't add up. So I go to Rudy, and I say, Rudy, it's bad enough that we have this tiny crowd, but now we're going to lie about it like 3 or 4 times over? And this is what he says. Did it ever occur to you, you little wise ass, that maybe there are some people at the concession stands or at the restrooms? And I say, Rudy, let's test your premise. Let's suppose there was a sellout. Let's suppose there were 19,000 fans here. What's the chance that at any given time other than halftime, 9,500 of them are buying a hot dog or relieving themselves? And he gets all flustered. He goes, just sit your ass back down and call the damn game.
I used to go, we're talking to Bob Costas, I used to go to the Cincinnati Royals games, and we would sneak in, and I could eventually end up in the front row. I sat in the front row when the Bulls came to town with Howard Porter. They had Jerry Sloan. I actually saw Jerry Sloan play in person. Bob Weiss, like all of these, it was the Royals against the Bulls, and nobody cared. And they would announce the crowd at like 2,000. And we actually counted one night, and it was 519 because the game wasn't interesting. But the whole we're going to lie about the size of a crowd. I witnessed that firsthand, with the Cincinnati Royals. But I don't know how that would affect you if you call a game and there's no crowd there. How much do you play off of that crowd when you're calling a game?
Oh, you have to. Not just when the crowd surges on a big play. You'd be missing that excitement. But let's say it's just baseball. There's a murmur of the crowd at all times. I heard Joe Buck the other night on Real Sports on HBO with Bryant Gumbel. Joe thought there was some merit to the idea of pumping in crowd sound.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
I don't know.
I'm fine with it.
Everything you can try every out-of-the-box thing under these circumstances.
I'm fine with that. The Bulls documentary, you watching? Oh,
yeah. Haven't missed a second of it. I think it's great.
What are you because you're involved in this because NBC carried the NBA for such a long period of time. You were there for Michael's final game with the Bulls. Did you know at the time that was going to be his final game with the Bulls? I
think we all strongly suspected it, and that's why even as exciting and significant as that game was, simply as an NBA Finals series, it was one of the best. But my comments at the end, I tried to frame it. I didn't know for sure that it was the end, but I assumed it was a very strong possibility. So in addition to just calling what was a very exciting game, I tried to frame it in that context, that this was the end of one of the most memorable runs by a team in American sports history, and certainly one of the most transcendent players in any sport.
I don't know if Babe Ruth was as beloved when he played, when he went around these other parks, because Michael was beloved. Fans couldn't wait to see him, even if he was going to get 40 on their team. I don't know. Do you recall if Babe Ruth was, I know he was a phenomenon, but was he beloved the way Michael was beloved each town?
Do I recall it firsthand, Dan, when I put on my fedora and rode a streetcar to the ball game and took my date on Ladies' Day for a quarter to see the Babe face Walter Johnson and the Senators?
Hey, smartass, just sit down. Now, do you think that Babe was admired that way of anything you've ever heard or read?
Yeah, he was a gigantic force. And even though it seems like, well, it doesn't seem like it is 100 years ago, in the 1920s, baseball and the country are moving into a different era. You got the beginning of some kind of mass communication. You got radio and whatnot. But still, there's enough distance so that everything that someone like Ruth did, or for that matter, a Jesse Owens or a Red Grange or a Jack Dempsey, any of the big heroes of that era, Joe Louis a little bit later, there's an element of myth and legend surrounding it. And maybe some of the stories are apocryphal. You don't have that now. We get to see everything, and then we get to replay it and dissect it and analyze it. Would Babe Ruth's called shot be a controversy at all, or something that, well, I saw it this way, you saw it that way? Today? Nah. In 10 seconds, we'd know whether he did it or not.
I wonder how the Bulls would do now. We grew tired of Golden State Warriors. It felt like people grew tired of the Patriots. People grew tired of the San Antonio Spurs. If the Bulls were playing now and had this dynasty, would we treat them the same way? Would they be as beloved? Because we tend to chop up everything nowadays, and everything is available there. Would they wear out their welcome?
Well, Michael Jordan was a singular figure, taking nothing away from other great players, including the great players Steph Curry and more on the Golden State Warriors. There was something about Jordan. If you imagined from central casting a leading man for that whole decade or more, that person is Michael Jordan. So I think he would still be just as compelling. But your larger point is true, Dan. Nothing is fully appreciated anymore. Nothing is. In our business, and you'll understand the context in which I say this, has there ever been someone better at what he did in our business than Vin Scully or Jim McKay hosting the Olympics? I guarantee you, if they were each 40 years old and plying their trade on national television today, there'd be all kinds of social media sniping at them, and people calling them an idiot while misspelling idiot in their moronic posts. Nothing, even the best gets full appreciation anymore. So, would it be different? Sure it would. It's only a little more than 20 years ago, but it seems like eons ago.
You're right. I wonder how they would critique Vin Scully's style now. Oh, you think you're so good, you don't have to have an analyst there? Like,
right.
You're so...
Hey, cut the poetry, Robert Frost, and give me the balls and strikes.
Oh, you're right. Oh, thanks for making me laugh. Hey, great to talk to you. Dan. Hope everything's well, and we appreciate your time as always, Bob.
Stay well, Dan.
All right, that's Bob Costas, Hall of Famer, MLB Network host.